This week on the College Football Roundup, the portal kicks into high gear. The college football playoff continues. Michigan gets a new coach and so much more. This is the Monday Report, starting now. All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday Report. It is Monday, January 5th, 2026, and this is the Monday Report. I'm your host, H. James K., and you are listening to my brand new audio setup. Yes, I've got a brand new condenser mic. I've got a pop filter, a new stand, XLR cables, new mixing equipment. I got the whole smack. It was my Christmas presents this year. I'm very lucky, and I love it. Don't I sound better? Let me know in the comments because, I know all three of you are listening. Anyway, today we got a busy packed show for you. We're going to talk about the college football playoff games that were. We're going to talk about the college football playoff games yet to come. We're going to talk about Michigan's new coaching staff. I'll mention a little bit about Michigan versus Texas in their bowl game. We'll get a little bit of transfer portal news. We'll get some quick hits that are just more like quick thoughts on my end. And then we will get out of here. All right, on with it. Starting from the top, we had college football playoff games. So we started it off with Miami versus Ohio State. Miami won the game with a final score of 24-14. Carson Beck went 19 of 26 for 138 yards and a touchdown, while Ohio State's Julian Sayin went 22 of 35 for 287 yards, one touchdown, two interceptions. Miami's running back Mark Fletcher Jr. finished the game with 19 carries for 90 yards. Miami had 153 as a team. Ohio State ran for only 45 yards as a team. So this game kind of played out how I thought it would, just, in the opposite direction. The team that controlled the trenches won the game. Plain and simple. That's it. The team that won in the trenches won the game. Miami was just, their pass rush was disgusting. They were everywhere. And it's one of these things where Ohio State couldn't block the defensive line, and Ohio State's defense couldn't get off their blocks. They allowed Miami to really control the pace of the game. They made significantly more mistakes than Miami did. It was a game where, in these games that are played really tight in the margins, the team that made the fewer mistakes won. The team that controlled the line of scrimmage won. And for a team, speaking of Ohio State, who claimed to have all of their games, that's how they wanted to play, they didn't do a great job of it, to be honest with you. They didn't do a good job of it. Because some of the flaws that we've been kind of ignoring about Ohio State all year manifested themselves, like the fact that they don't make anyone miss in the running game. What they get before contact is what they get. They don't break tackles, they don't juke defenders, it's the whole thing. In the passing game, they were explosive all year, but they weren't like C.J. Stroud, Jackson Smith, and Jigba explosive all the time. Let me take a drink. I have no idea if my mic picked up all that water drinking, but if it did, I am sorry. But it's one of these things where all year we were kind of wondering, yeah, Ohio State kind of beat the crap out of them, but they didn't look it didn't look easy, And as we saw in this game, that's because Ohio State's offense has some flaws. Part of it is they had an inexperienced quarterback. Julian Sayin is only a sophomore. This was his first year as a starter, and it really, really, really showed. It was very obvious that he was not, Fernando Mendoza level experienced. And my last thought about this game is I totally called the score. I predicted 23-14 Ohio State. I just got the team wrong. It was 24-14, which I think it's hilarious. But this was a great game as a Michigan Wolverines fan because, well, watching Ohio State lose is great. But more seriously, this was a great low-scoring game. There was good defense, there was good offense. Both teams made good plays, but it wasn't sloppy, and that's the important thing. So many of these low-scoring games are because of penalties, and it's raining, and you can't run, and everyone's dropping everything. But this was just a hard-fought game. Now, the next game, it was not a good game. Oregon took on Texas Tech, beating the Red Raiders 23-0. Ugh. Dante Moore, Oregon's quarterback, finished the game 26 of 33 for 234 yards with an interception. He also had 10 carries for negative 12 yards rushing. Texas Tech quarterback Baron Morton, who I think was injured. I don't know if he was injured or not, but he played like crap. He went 18 of 32 for 137 yards and 2 interceptions. He also had negative 32 rushing yards on just 6 carries. So this was an ugly game where Oregon was in control, yet they continually gave Texas Tech more chances to get in the game. It was very weird. It's like, we're winning, but we're not winning comfortably. And yeah, we're winning, but we keep making weird mistakes and turnovers and stuff like that just let them hang around even though they're not really hanging around. It was very weird. It was also the most boring game of the lot. I only passively watched this game because, quite frankly, I just couldn't muster up the energy to care. It was I tried so hard to be locked in, but it was so boring. Oh my Lord, it was so boring. Watching paint dry would be more entertaining than that game. And part of it was Texas Tech was a limp noodle who didn't show up and they just didn't feel like playing that day. But another part of it is because of the weather, it was just a sloppy game. Drops, poor rushing, tripping. It was ugly. But Oregon controlled the game. Their defense was really good. In spite of the fact that Dante Moore and the offense just couldn't get out of their own way, they continually smothered Texas Tech. They kept the Red Raiders offense off the field and just kind of took over the game, which, that's what you want in a game like that. But the final score was 23-0, which is horrible. All right, the next game was an even bigger butt whipping. Indiana took on the Alabama Crimson Tide, defeating the Tide 38-3. Holy crap. Oh my God. I thoroughly enjoyed this game because, who doesn't want the Hoosiers to succeed? Sorry, not sorry. But this game, we should have seen it as a sign when Kalen DeBoer went for it in the first half on his 36-yard line. We should have known right then that he understood that, oh God, this is going to be one of those games. Yeah, we don't really have a lot, So it was just, I just kind of found that really interesting. At the time, it was like, what a weird idea. What a weird decision. But then in hindsight, it's like, oh yeah, they knew that they were going to get their butt kicked and they needed to get every possession they could get their hands on. Which, very interesting stuff. Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza, he went 14 of 16 for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. Yes, you heard that right. He threw more touchdowns than he had incompletions on the day. Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson went 12 of 16 for 67 yards and a fumble. And that was his 7th straight fumble in 7 games or something like that. But that fumble eventually knocked him out of the game. It didn't do it at first, it wasn't immediate, but it was clear that he wasn't okay, and he tried it for another drive, but it knocked him out. He had a cracked rib, so he came out of the game and was replaced by quarterback Austin Mack, who went 11 of 16 for 103 yards. Just hit my new mic. I'm kind of getting used to this new mic, as it's a much bigger setup, and we're learning. It's kind of jank at the moment, but I'll figure out the audio levels and all that other stuff as we kind of go along. So Indiana as a team had 215 rushing yards compared to I think it was 23 for Alabama. I'm going to look that up while I talk about this game. So this game was maybe the most surprising result of the playoff era. I expected Indiana to control the game, but I didn't expect them to completely demoralize Alabama by halftime. That blew my mind. I cannot believe that was even possible. Where it was oh yeah, they just don't want to be here anymore. They don't want to be here anymore. They're done. At halftime, it looked like Alabama was done. which is just ridiculously impressive. It's one of those where it recalibrated my entire thinking of this team, this Indiana team and Alabama. It was ridiculous. Yes, 17 carries, 23 yards. It took me a while to look it up, but we got there eventually. To tell you how bad this loss is for Bama, I remember in the second quarter, I think it was the second quarter, I turned to my dad and I said, "Yeah, I bet Kalen DeBoer wishes he took the Michigan job right about now." And we both laughed. And then we both made that joke again in the third quarter, and then again in the fourth quarter. Yeah, that was the joke. It's like, "Oh, I bet you wish you took that Michigan job now, huh?" Because oh my, it was crazy. That was a butt whooping. For Alabama, man, my headphones are very loud. Let me turn those down a little bit. Oh, there we go. That's better. All right. We're still working on the audio level. I have a new pair of headphones that are feeding my audio feed back to me, but they were a little loud. All right. So for Indiana, you're just rock solid. You're the first and only team to get a bye in the 12-team playoff era and win a game. The 8 possible teams are 1-7 in 2 years. Indiana is the only team to ever do it because they were the best coach team in the playoffs right now. They're the most well prepared. They don't beat themselves. And for Alabama, you got to do some soul searching. What happened in that game is a symptom of a much larger problem, an identity problem for Alabama. It's no secret that Kalen DeBoer teams struggle to run the ball. Part of that is Ryan Grubb, his offensive coordinator. The Seattle Seahawks struggled to run the ball last year when Ryan Grubb was their offensive coordinator. They fired him and they can run the ball this year. At Washington, back in 2023, Washington struggled horrifically to run the ball against Michigan and in some other big games. And obviously this year, Ty Simpson was having to do it all, and it was causing fumbles and injuries, and 70% of Alabama's offensive yardage came from the passing game. And that's not championship team stuff. That's not how that works. Doing that is like warning, danger, Will Robinson, big alarm bells. So they need to do some soul searching and rediscover their physicality and rediscover that hard edge that the Nick Saban era gave them. Because man, if this is what Alabama is going to be under Kalen DeBoer, they'll never win a dang thing. They will never win a thing. All right, moving on. Let's talk about Ole Miss taking on Georgia. Man, this game was absolutely incredible. This game had it all. High highs and crushing lows for both teams, turnovers, incredible plays, crazy penalties that made no sense. It had it all. Ole Miss ultimately triumphed over the Georgia Bulldogs, getting revenge for earlier in the season, winning 39-34. It was going to be 37-34, but on the final kickoff at Ole Miss kicked a game-winning field goal to make it 37-34. And then Ole Miss kicked the ball to Georgia, and they tried this weird lateral play, and the ball ended up rolling into their own end zone pylon, which is a safety, making it 39-34. But the clock had gone to 0, but the refs wouldn't let the clock go to 0. And something on my pop filter. Whoops. Sorry about that. So the refs wouldn't let the game end, and they put some time on the clock to do the free kick, and Ole Miss didn't touch the ball on the free kick, which was basically an onside attempt. So the 1 second that the refs put on the clock didn't go away. But they'd already celebrated on the field twice and brought up the stage and had to put those things back. So then they had to they had to run a play and kneel it out, and it took like 5 extra minutes, and it was just this whole thing. It was embarrassing, to be honest with you. It was like, refs, what are we doing, guys? Let's stop it. Stop it. Get some help. I keep knocking into my pop filter. That is going to take some getting used to. It's definitely a different seating position. I've got to like look at one way and look at with my eyes another way, but we're figuring it out. And you're probably going to hear me commenting on my new audio setup a couple of times over the next several weeks as I learn how all of this is going to work. Either way, this was one of the best games we've had in the college football playoff era, hands down. Right up there with the 2023 Rose Bowl and the 2022, what was that, the Sugar Bowl? Georgia versus Ohio State. That game was ridiculous. So it was a great game. Georgia led 21-12 at halftime, but an incredible 20-point fourth quarter was enough to help the Rebels conquer the Georgia Bulldogs. Ole Miss quarterback Trinidad Chambliss, who is from Michigan, played at Ferris State University, went 30 of 46 for 362 yards and 2 touchdowns. That dude is freaking incredible. He made some plays in that game where I'm like, oh my God, you'll never be able to do that in the NFL, but that doesn't mean it's not incredible. Like, there was this one play where he ran, like, scrambled backwards to the right, and then he had to turn away from a pass rush and scrambled back to the left, and he threw this ball, like, against his body while running over a defender into the hands of his running back, who ran for, like, 12 yards to get a first down. It was just disgusting. It was like, that's the kind of stuff you do in, like, Madden or EA Sports College Football 26 or whatever. So, he was incredible. Georgia quarterback Gunnar Stockton, on the other hand, he fell short of what was required to win. Yet again, I have not been impressed with Gunnar Stockton. I don't think anyone is, to be honest with you. He's just okay. He went 18 of 31 for 203 yards and a touchdown. So, what do I think about this game? So, Georgia had been playing with fire all year. What do I mean by that? Well, there were multiple games. I think there were 4 of them. Well, they were down at least a touchdown in those games late in the game, and they had to overcome those deficits to win the game. So, no matter how you slice it, that's bad. A team that is reliant... Oh, whoops. I keep hitting my XLR cable. I don't know if you can hear that on the audio. I apologize. I keep bumping into that thing. A team that is continually finding themselves down because they're starting slow is a team that's going to lose eventually. Now, what's interesting about this game is Georgia didn't start slow. They got they got out on Ole Miss. There was like a pick six or something. I think it was the pick six was that game. Was that Georgia Ole Miss? Maybe. I can't remember. I apologize. It was days ago. But, they got out on Ole Miss before halftime, but Ole Miss just climbed back in and outlasted them, and that was it. It was one of these things where Georgia couldn't... They finally ran into a moment where they couldn't overcome their tendencies all year. Now, for Ole Miss, this is a game, and I know this is going to be kind of weird. If Lane Kiffin was the head coach at Ole Miss, they would have lost this game. This is one of these things that I firmly believe that a football team is a reflection of their head coach. Teams that fail to win big games, fail to pull through in the big, high leverage moments, that is a reflection of coaching and locker room culture. Pete Golding is not Lane Kiffin, and he was able to keep his team focused. They were able to stay in the moment and play every play like it was the last play of their lives. And when Georgia did something crazy, they didn't go all woe is me and freak out and give up. They said, all right, we'll just claw our way out of that one too. And that is the difference. And that's what bothers Lane Kiffin, because he knows in his heart that he would have lost that game. I guarantee you he knows it. But it was a great game. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It went on all hours of the night. And the funny thing is, in the first quarter, I didn't want to watch. I almost went to bed because I had been watching football all day, almost continuously. But I just said, no, I'll keep watching. Maybe I'll fall asleep, whatever. And then it got great, and then better, and even better than that, and legendary. And it was just, I'm so glad I didn't go to bed. I'm so glad. All right. So, moving on from the college football playoff games that were, let's talk about Michigan. Michigan got a new head coach. So, in the time since, it feels like it's been 3 weeks since I last recorded an episode. It's only been 1 week, but a lot has happened in 1 week. So backing up so we can kind of get all of this. Utah, they pushed Kyle Whittingham, who has been their head coach since like 2005, and he'd been with the team in some capacity as a coach since 1994. They pushed him out so they could keep Morgan Scalley, their defensive coordinator, who was their coach in waiting. So when Michigan fired Sharon Moore, Kyle Whittingham wasn't even on the radar. But according to Whittingham, almost immediately they started talking to Kyle Whittingham. And he has now become the head coach at the University of Michigan. His staff is basically complete. I have it all written down here. Some of them haven't been made super uber official yet, but this is all of them when they all, it's all here. Just some of the ink hasn't quite dried yet on some of them, but they're all here. So on offense, he's bringing offensive coordinator Jason Beck with him from Utah. Jason Beck was the offensive coordinator that Whittingham hired at Utah last year from New Mexico. Great offensive mind. They were like the second best rushing team in the country. They had like 41 points per game. Great offensive mind. It's huge that Whittingham was able to bring Jason Beck with him. Now, even bigger maybe is the fact that he convinced offensive line coach / assistant head coach Jim Harding to follow him from Utah to Michigan. Jim Harding is regarded as one of, if not the best offensive line coach in the country. So that's huge. That's huge. They're probably going to put Utah's probably going to put 2 offensive linemen in the NFL this coming draft, for reference. At quarterback coach, Coy Detmer Jr. is following Whittingham from Utah to Michigan. Him along with Jason Beck were able to turn transfer quarterback Devin Dampierre into a great running quarterback for Utah in 2025. At running back, running backs coach Tony Alford is being retained from Sharon Moore's staff. He's a former Urban Meyer coach. Tony Alford's brother, like Mike Alford or Alex Alford or whatever, who's sadly deceased now, coached with Kyle Whittingham once upon a time. So there's a connection there. He's a great coach and he's a holdover. At wide receiver coach, Micah Simon followed Whittingham from Utah, while he poached assistant wide receiver coach. While he poached Penn State's wide receivers coach Marquise Hagens to come over and be the assistant wide receivers coach. To finish out the offensive staff, Whittingham hired his brother Freddie Whittingham to come over with him from Utah, I think. Yes. On the defensive staff, there are significantly fewer coaches. Part of that is because Whittingham is a defensive guy, so he probably doesn't think he needs as many coaches. So, defensive coordinator, Whittingham poached BYU's Jay Hill. Jay Hill is regarded as a great defensive mind, very much an up-and-comer, coached with Whittingham before. What you'll see is almost all of these guys coached with Whittingham before. Almost all of them. So Jay Hill had been with Whittingham at Utah, and then he left to be the DC at BYU. So he is following. He is coming to Michigan to be the new defensive coordinator. At defensive end / edge coach, Whittingham hired Lewis Powell, who was the Utah defensive line coach. Lewis Powell, I guess, is regarded as a pretty good defensive line coach. He will be coaching just the exterior D-line guys because Whittingham is retaining defensive tackles coach Lou Esposito. Esposito is being retained from the Sherrone Moore staff. He was just the D-line coach under Sherrone Moore, but he's just now the interior defensive lineman. That's, nose tackles, 5 techs, defensive tackles. So he's a great recruiter, much like Alford, and he has a good reputation, so he's being retained. At linebacker coach, this is one that kind of went under the radar, but it's kind of a big deal. So at linebacker coach, Kyle Whittingham hired his son, Alex Whittingham. Now, you might be saying, but that's just nepotism. That's not good. It is nepotism, but Alex Whittingham has been the linebackers coach for the Kansas City Chiefs for the last 5 years. He has 3 Super Bowl rings. Think about it. That man is now the linebackers coach at the University of Michigan. A Super Bowl winning position coach. I mean, to be honest with you, position coaches at the NFL level are usually top-level head coaches in college. So that's a big get. That's a get that for some reason didn't get ooh, but it's huge. And then rounding out the new hires on the defensive side of the ball, Gennaro Guilford is I just heard something weird. Sorry, got distracted. Forgive me. Gennaro Guilford is going to be the defensive backs coach. He has been coaching at BYU for the last couple of years. He's regarded as like an up-and-comer. He's got a connection to Whittingham. All these guys have a connection to Whittingham. And for special teams, Kerry Coombs, who was the special teams coach and defensive backs coach. One second. Sorry about that, folks. I was picking up feedback from something on my mic, and I had to make an adjustment. Sorry about that. Yeah, so Kerry Coombs, who was the cornerbacks coach and special teams coordinator for Urban Meyer at Ohio State, he did become the defensive coordinator, and he wasn't great at that, but he was a great recruiter at cornerback, and he's a great special teams coach, so he is being retained. He had only been hired for a week and a half when Sherrone Moore got fired. And as we saw in the Michigan Bowl game, special teams was absolutely incredible. They did so much to help Michigan stay in that game against Texas. So that is the Michigan coaching staff. What do I think of all this? Kyle Whittingham is 66 years old, meaning he is not going to be someone who's around for the next 10, 15 years. So what? I truly believe that if he can give Michigan 4 or 5 great years, that's all we need. Because then you're talking about he can retire and Michigan can Michigan will have been stable for several years and can move on to another coach with a better foundation. He's one of the best coaches in the country. And Urban Meyer swears up and down that he's the best in college football. So, I like the hire a lot. It wasn't even on my radar. It wasn't on my radar at all. So I may have talked about this last week, but so much has happened. I figured I'd go through all this again. I'm excited for the future. I can't deny it. I am excited for the future. All right, let's move on to the very end of the Jim Harbaugh, Sherrone Moore era. So Michigan took on Texas in the Citrus Bowl, and Texas was they woke up feeling the cheesiest this time because they defeated Michigan 41-27, and this game was close the whole way. It was back and forth until the fourth quarter. Arch Manning was fan-freaking-tastic. He went 21 of 34 for 221 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had 9 carries for 155 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, and one of those rushing touchdowns was 60 yards. I didn't realize he was that fast. He was incredible. It was if he had played like that from the beginning of the year, he'd have won the Heisman because he was just incredible. Now, someone who wasn't incredible was Bryce Underwood. So, this is really unfortunate because for 3 quarters, Bryce Underwood and the Michigan offense was playing the best game they had ever played. And then the fourth quarter happened. So Bryce Underwood finished the day 23 of 42 for 199 yards. He threw for 2 touchdowns, but he threw 3 fourth quarter interceptions. And they were like bang, bang, bang on like almost consecutive drives. It was horrible. He also finished the day with 14 carries for 69 yards. So Bryce Underwood, his mechanics are horrible. His footwork is horrible. He just ditches his mechanics. His throwing motion can get kind of weird. And what we're noticing, and this is poor coaching from the Michigan staff, that the Michigan staff that was. And whenever things went bad, he just he would lose his composure. And things got like, the first pick was just a great play by the Texas defender. It was a bad decision by Underwood, but you like, okay, it happens. But from then on, he was not the same quarterback. And he threw 2 more interceptions that were back-breaking. This was a game that was like, it was 31-27. And then Underwood threw 3 interceptions and they got 41-27, and that was it. And once he threw those interceptions, Michigan's offense was done. That was it. It was done. And you could make the argument that maybe, losing Chip Lindsey, that hurt, obviously, and, not having a real head coach and only having Biff Poggi was a problem. But his lack of composure is coaching. His lack of passing fundamentals is coaching. And I'm hopeful that if Michigan can get some weapons around him, that this new staff can, improve him a little bit, because man, oh man, that fourth quarter was brutal. Now, you won't see me very upset because I thought it was a great game. This was a fantastic game. And until the fourth quarter, I was like, I don't care who wins. This is the best bowl game like ever. It was awesome. Teams that were going back and forth. These teams were... And here's something else. This game felt like a playoff game. It felt like there were stakes to this game. Like, winning was going to frickin' matter. And the crowd was into it. And the commentators were like, just living it up. It was awesome. And then the fourth quarter happened and Michigan choked it away. But that, Michigan was a poorly coached, super young team. And I'm glad that era is over. That we're at a new era, we got a new staff, and I'm not going to sit here and, ranting and raving for, the pass blocking, whatever. We're moving on. We are turning the page on that entire era, and we're moving on, not looking back. The game happened. It's unfortunate that Michigan lost. Moving on. So, gotta adjust these headphones again. All right, let's try that. Yeah, there we go. I'm not deafening myself anymore. All right, so let's talk about the transfer portal, because we have, it's early days, so there's, not much going on, but there are some things. So, the biggest ones we've seen so far is Michigan State wide receiver Nick Marsh, who's not the top wide receiver in the portal, but I'd say he's probably number 5 or number 6, somewhere in there, 4 or 5 or 6. He committed to Indiana, which that's kind of painful because Nick Marsh is fast, he's tall, he's a big-bodied, wide catch radius kind of guy, and he's going to be playing for Indiana next year. And the other big shoe to drop was TCU quarterback Josh Hoover, who was an underrated quarterback in the Big 12. Yeah, he transferred to Indiana too. So Indiana's not going anywhere, guys. Yeah, because we have to remember, Fernando Mendoza was a big deal, but he wasn't viewed like Carson Beck or anyone like that. He wasn't like, he's the top quarterback in the portal. No, he was a good quarterback, but he wasn't like super elite like, John Mateer. So, yeah, Josh Hoover, probably going to be my Heisman favorite next summer. Nothing like just plain old water. But, yeah, it's early days in the portal. I mean, the portal has been open for 3 days now. Hopefully Michigan can land some guys in the portal instead of losing guys. We'll talk about that in a second. Um, Actually, you know what? Let's talk about that right frickin' now. Yeah, let's talk about that right now. So, Michigan lost some guys. Yeah, right tackle Andrew Sprague, who was a very young guy, all conference. I'd argue the top O lineman in the portal right now. Yeah, he jumped in the portal. That's devastating one, and he came in with a do not contact tag, so that leads me to believe he's probably got a team that he's probably got a team picked out already, which means he was tampered with, which is legal. Not that anyone cares. If I had to guess, I'd say probably Texas is where he ends up if he doesn't come back. I'm hoping that he'll come back to Michigan. That this is just an NIL ploy, but it happened. The other one, Michigan left. I think he's left guard. No, right guard Jake Guinera, who's another young guy who was an all conference selection. He jumped in the portal, and it's looking like he was it him or Sprague? No, sorry, no. Sprague looks like he's probably going to be following Chip Lindsey to Missouri. I guess Sprague is from Missouri, and Guinera is the one who is apparently kind of on Texas's radar. So, yeah, that is a thing. Oh, and then the other one that's a real kick in the teeth is linebacker Cole Sullivan, who's a very very talented young linebacker, and he jumped in the portal. Now they say there is a likelihood that he probably will come back. But it still sucks. Like Michigan, like everyone else, has put a whole bunch of guys in the portal, but losing two O-line starters and arguably your best young linebacker is that hurts. But it's early in the cycle. I have a feeling that another week from now, Michigan will start landing some guys. So, but next week maybe I'll give another portal update. If anything else earth-shattering has happened. All right, now let's do some quick hits. So once again, the SEC had a disappointing bowl record in 2025, which will only get worse if Ole Miss doesn't win on Thursday. I think Thursday or Friday. I think they're like 2-9 or something like that. 2-9, 3-9, 3-8, somewhere in there. It just means more, I guess. They say it just means more. Yeah, more losses. I kind of enjoyed watching the SEC lose because it was fun watching people online who had been like there was the SEC. I think he's not SEC. Like SEC stats guy or whatever on Twitter, or SEC media guy or something like that. I don't know. Who had tweeted that like, okay, cool. Now the last 5 bowl games for the ACC are the easiest winnable ones, and they were like the 5 biggest bowl game matchups for the SEC, and they went like 1-4 in those 5 games. Like Illinois lost, Vanderbilt lost, Texas won, but it was LSU lost. So it's been kind of funny watching people kind of pile on. So with Texas Tech's loss, that kind of caps off a disappointing season for the Big 12. They only got one team in the playoff, and that team got embarrassed. BYU had a great win in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, but it's the Pop-Tarts Bowl. It's not a playoff. And the Big 12 will be looking to bounce back next year. I'm getting kind of a weird headache from these headphones. Got to work on that. And lastly, the college football calendar is insane. So we've got half of the offensive staff at Ole Miss is leaving right now to go coach with LSU because they clearly didn't expect to win that game. So even though they've got more games to continue, of the like 6 that are leaving, 5 of them left, and the only one that came back is offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss Jr. So the calendar needs to change. There needs to be no tampering with coaches like there is in the NFL. That stuff's got to be handled after the season. It's just freaking crazy. It's disgusting, really. And after the season is over, I'm going to post an episode where I fix college football. All of my ideas to kind of fix the schedule and the calendars and play and playoffs and stuff like that. So the portal, all that stuff. But yeah, it's disgusting watching what's happening in college football. All right, now this last thing we're going to talk about, let's talk about the coming playoff games. We have two of them. All right, first of all, we have Miami taking on the Ole Miss Rebels. This game is taking place in the Verbo Fiesta Bowl. That game is taking place at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona, home of the Arizona Cardinals. The game is kicking off on Thursday, January 8th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on ESPN. Miami is currently favored by 2.5 points, but you can get up to as much as 3.5 depending on the sports book you look at. Key players for Miami, Carson Beck. He was extremely limited in their last game and the game before that, but I think he's going to have to be more explosive in this next game for Miami to win. Other key players, the Miami secondary. Trinidad Chambliss is a very explosive quarterback, and while he's going to get his yards. These guys, they always get theirs. If Miami wants to win, they're going to have to limit the kind of the explosive plays down the field. They're just going to have to. On the Ole Miss side, key players are obvious. Quarterback Trinidad Chambliss. If he has a good game, they can win. If he doesn't, they'll lose. But for him, it's going to be handling the Miami pass rush. If he can dodge the pass rush and make explosive plays in a kind of an asymmetrical way, that'll do a lot to help keep the chains running, because I don't think Ole Miss is going to be able to run the ball super well on Miami. Now, on the defensive side, Ole Miss defensive end Prince Will Umanmielen. Great defensive lineman, really good pass rusher. I think he is going to have a pretty big day and really disrupt Carson Beck in order to force Miami to be more one-dimensional. If you can force, or not even that, to force Miami to alter their game plan. Maybe they have to just completely ditch the drop-back passing and go to more rollouts, or, no play action, that kind of stuff. If he can have a big game and knock Miami off their game plan, then Ole Miss will win the game. My ultimate keys to the game: can Miami limit chaos plays from the Ole Miss offense? Can they prevent Chambliss from running around in circles and getting crazy blown coverage pass plays down the field? If they can, then they'll win rather easily, because I think their defensive line will have a day in that scenario. The other one, can Ole Miss overcome the losses to their coaching staff between games? So losing all these coaching staffs, the roster seems rather cohesive, but losing all those coaches cannot be understated. A lot of people are going to have to be doing a lot of different things that they weren't doing, last week. So it'll be interesting to see if they can let me adjust that. If they can there we go. Headphones give me a headache. Had to kind of tweak some levels real quick. But yeah, that's what it's going to take for Ole Miss to, win the game. My ultimate prediction, though, I think Miami's going to win 35-31. I do think it's going to be much more explosive than the last two Miami games, just because I don't think Ole Miss's defense is that great. But I do think ultimately Miami is going to win. I just think they're better in the trenches on both sides, and I think that's going to matter. And in our last game of this round of the playoffs, you've got Indiana taking on Oregon. This game is taking place at the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, home of the Atlanta Falcons. The game is taking place on Friday, January 9th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on ESPN. Indiana is favored by 4 points. So, key players for the game. On Indiana's part, quarterback Fernando Mendoza. Duh. Yeah, the Heisman Trophy winning QB who was great in their last game and even better in the Big Ten Championship. Yeah, he's going to have a big game. just like always, if he's great, like he has been, they'll win rather easily. If he's not great, they can still win, but it'll be a much harder game. Other than Fernando Mendoza, I think the Indiana defensive line is going to be key. If they can do what they did to Alabama, what they did to Penn State, what they did to Ohio State, where they just impose their will and just grind the other team to dust, I think they'll win. Because teams that play that kind of ball, they get demoralized. They demoralize their opponents, and their opponents just kind of give up. They tap out. And if the defensive line for Indiana can dominate, then Oregon will tap out. On the Oregon side, key players are quarterback Dante Moore. This is less about Dante Moore being great as much as it's about Dante Moore limiting mistakes. If he plays like he did against Texas Tech, they'll lose. He was not good against Texas Tech. He was very sloppy. If he plays like they did against Iowa, they'll lose. He's going to have to be perfect. Now, I'm not talking completion percentage. I mean, no back-breaking interceptions, no strip sack fumbles, no 15-yard loss on a sack. He's going to have to play a game that's flawless. Because as we've seen, if you give Indiana an inch, they'll take a mile. If you give them a mile, they'll just take over your whole damn neighborhood. So that one's going to be huge. Can he limit the mistakes? And lastly, on the key players, wide receiver Malik Benson. I think this one's going to be big because someone is going to have to step up when Indiana invariably takes the running game away from Oregon. And I think it's going to have to be Malik Benson. He's a very good wide receiver. And if he can have himself a day, they can stay in it. Keys to the game. Can Oregon protect Dante Moore? Can they do it? Because Texas Tech's defense gave them some trouble. And while Texas Tech has a good defense, they're not Indiana's defense. Indiana's defense, which is as no name as they come, that's a good defense. And last key to the game, can Oregon limit mistakes? Oregon made a lot of mistakes, failed fourth down attempts, fumbles, interceptions, that kind of thing against Texas Tech. If they play like that, they'll get blown out. So can they limit mistakes? Are you seeing a trend with these keys to the game? To me, if Indiana shows up and plays their game, they win. If Oregon shows up and plays their game, they might win. Oregon is going to have to be perfect to win this game. I am predicting that Indiana is going to win 31-24. And it's going to be a good game, but it's going to be a game that's more comfortable than the scoreboard suggests. All right, for those of you listening on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and everywhere else that podcasts are available, thank you. For those of you watching on YouTube, please consider commenting, subscribing, hitting the bell icon to get notifications, and doing all the things to feed the algorithm. We're trying to get to 10 subscribers again. Next week, I'll be recapping these two semifinal playoff games, and we'll talk about the college football national championship and talk some more about the portal and if there's any other big news. And that will probably do it for the college football roundup for the season, and we'll just go back to regularly scheduled programming where just college football will be a segment in a much larger show. So my name is H. James K. Thank you all for tuning in. Until next time.